I'm going to ask you all to imagine you're sitting in a courtroom. It's not just any courtroom, of course. It's the courtroom located in Calumet County, Wisconsin. You're one of 16 people who've been asked to decide the largest homicide case in Wisconsin history. State of Wisconsin versus Stephen Avery. You're entering the 7th week of what can best be described as a legal slugfest. You've heard from over 50 witnesses. You've considered over 500 trial exhibits. And now the lawyers are about to give their closing arguments. You're from Manitowoc County. You're from his county. You've been bused to Calumet County each morning for over the last 6 weeks. After days of testimony, you're bused back and spend each night at your home. You've been instructed, of course, not to watch any television about the Stephen Avery case, which has been a challenge since virtually every newscast dedicates half of their broadcast to the trial summary. That's the attention that this case has received. That's the kind of case this is. You were chosen because of exactly who you are. More importantly, you were chosen because you know Stephen Avery's backstory. You've come to realize that trial publicity is not an exact science. Publicity in a case this large with this particular defendant was always going to be high. You're not going to stop the media from covering a case like this with so much interest to the general public. Remember, this was the largest criminal case in Wisconsin history. Wisconsin's had large homicide cases before. Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, just to name a couple. Everybody knew, however, that the Stephen Avery case was the center of the legal universe in the spring of 2007. Stephen Avery's attorneys have complained that they could never get a fair trial in Manitowoc County. They had the option, of course, to change venue to any different county in Wisconsin. They could have picked a jury from La Crosse, or from Milwaukee, or from Madison. But they stuck with Manitowoc County jurors. In an email to co-counsel after the Avery trial, the attorneys indicated their jury was always going to be from Manitowoc County. It's in Manitowoc County that jurors would know of the backstory, would know of his wrongful conviction and the $36 million lawsuit that he had pending. Jurors were chosen because they knew the Avery backstory. Avery's lawyers never wanted an impartial jury. They wanted one that knew the backstory and would be biased in favor of Stephen Avery. Ask yourself, why did the Avery attorneys want you to know the backstory? I'm going to ask you to imagine the inside of the courtroom, the sounds, the smells. Although the courtroom is packed like it is every day, the silence is deafening. To the left of the jury box, you see 3 prosecutors. Just like the jury, all of those prosecutors were chosen for a reason. None of them are there by accident. All 3 are experienced trial lawyers. They have a combined 85 years trial experience in criminal cases. On the bench is Judge Patrick Willis. You've just heard him read what are called the jury instructions. You heard Judge Willis tell you that there's 3 charges, but everybody in the courtroom knows only one of the charges matters: first-degree intentional homicide. At the table left of the prosecutors are the defense attorneys, Jerry Buting and Dean Strang. These attorneys are two of the best criminal lawyers in all of Wisconsin. These are not lawyers who represent poor people. If you thought this was a case about poor people getting left without great representation or not having an opportunity to prepare or present their cases, it's not that kind of case. Dean Strang, Jerry Buting, and Steve Glynn and his team split $400,000 that Stephen Avery received as part of a civil settlement. $400,000 in attorney fees. If you thought this was a case about indigent individuals, it's not that kind of case. And at the defense table is Stephen Avery. That's him. You've seen him on TV. He became somewhat of a celebrity in Wisconsin through his exoneration. Stephen Avery hasn't spoken once during the entire trial. Then again, he didn't need to. His attorneys already told you everything that you needed to hear, both through their arguments and through press even before the case was called. Stephen Avery's lawyers, and especially Stephen Avery himself, spoke to the media before trial, early and often. You've already heard the entire defense. You didn't need to hear it here in the courtroom. Sitting behind the defense team in the first row is Ma and Pa Avery, Dolores and Alan. Just the kind of people you'd expect to own a junkyard. Not very well spoken, not fancy dressers, but there's an authenticity to them, especially when they describe Stephen's innocence. On the far left side of the courtroom behind the prosecution team are the Halbach family. The family has had to listen to details about the last 3 hours of Teresa Halbach's life. They've heard of possible torture, rape, murder, and mutilation. The world is watching this case. You already know that. You can feel it. You see by the throng of media around the courtroom, by all the extra security, by all the attention that you've received as a juror. You know this case is important. With all of the added scrutiny comes added pressure. The weight of this decision is certainly upon you and your fellow jurors. The duty that you feel towards justice cannot be overstated. I had several decisions to make about my closing argument. My style, though, was always the same, quiet and soft-spoken. I've always thought that if you want people to really hear you, you need to speak softer, not louder, and that served me well throughout my trial career. Standing up in that courtroom, however, I knew that I had to be in control of the facts, but speak to the jury in a way that they would understand. Together with my soft-spoken style, I decided to stick to the facts of the case, to inject less emotion rather than more emotion. Norm Gahn, one of the attorneys in the case, suggested that we hit them over the head with the facts. Every day the courtroom was packed. Every day the courtroom was silent. The emotion and energy in the room was palpable. I didn't need to do anything to add to that. Less emotion. The theme I chose for my closing Those facts are stubborn. Lawyers and witnesses, especially expert witnesses, can try to spin the facts or massage them, even misrepresent them. They don't change. I knew in this case if the defense had any chance of winning, it was going to need to do so through trickery and gamesmanship. We owned the facts. I was going to present the case fact by fact in my closing argument, something the jury both expected and I'm sure appreciated. The question remained, however, from whose eyes did I want the jury to see the evidence? That was easy. Through her eyes. Teresa Halbach was not a piece of evidence. She was a person. Teresa was a vibrant, successful role model to her sisters and all young women. She was on her way to a successful and fulfilling photography career. I spent 6 weeks bringing Teresa into the courtroom. I asked the jurors to listen. Listen to the evidence that Teresa has left behind for you. She left her blood, her hair, her teeth. She left her SUV and the keys for her car. She left ribbons from her jeans. She left her phone, her PDA, her camera. She left her saliva on her Pepsi can. She left her voice on a voicemail. And she left her bones. Teresa was saying to the jurors, this is where I was. This is what happened to me. This is who killed me. Judge Patrick Willis was a fine trial judge. He was unassuming. He was always polite. He was thorough in his rulings. He was fair. He understood how big this case was, and he made sure the record was complete. Judge Willis never tipped his hand about what he thought of Steven Avery. On August 1st, 2007, for the first time, Judge Willis got to tell the defendant, to tell the attorneys, the Halbach family, and members of the community what he thought of this unrepentant killer standing before him.
In terms of assessing your danger to society, the evidence forces me to conclude that you are probably the most dangerous individual ever to set foot in this courtroom.
This is the Steven Avery case. It's one of the most scrutinized criminal cases in U.S. history, rivaling that of the JFK assassination and the O.J. Simpson case. This case is controversial. It's polarizing. It makes you take a position. This case also remains one of the most educational homicide cases in our history. I hope to provide you with some real examples and practice tips that are going to illustrate complex legal concepts. You'll see all the courtroom exhibits. You'll hear from the witnesses. You'll hear jail calls and other exclusive content. You can decide for yourself whether Steven Avery, together with his nephew Brendan Dassey, were guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, or whether he was once again convicted for a crime he never committed.